What's up, sports fans? This is the Lucas Ross Sports Channel. It is time to give you my 2024 Big 12 football preseason power rankings for the 2024 college football season. Yesterday I did the Big 10, and then a couple days ago I gave you my preseason power rankings for the SEC. So if you have not seen my preseason power rankings for the Big 10 and the SEC, be sure to go back and watch those two videos. And like I said, I might do some power rankings for all the Power 4 conferences week by week during the college football season, give you some updated power rankings as the week by week goes on. And I might do the SEC and the Big 10 on Tuesdays, and then on Thursdays I might do the Big 12 and the ACC. I'm going to give you my Big 12 preseason power rankings here for today, and then tomorrow I'll end things out with the ACC. So again, we're doing every single Power 4 conference, giving you my preseason power rankings. Again, this is just based off of the preseason expectations for all the Big 12 teams, and then also what high expectations and low expectations these Big 12 teams going into the season. And again, the real season doesn't really start next weekend for the Big 12, or I should say next week. Some games are going to be on Thursday for this conference, but let's go ahead and get right into my preseason power rankings here for the Big 12 for 2024. We'll start from the bottom and work our way to the top. So we start here with number 16, and that's going to be Cincinnati. Cincinnati is a team that, a lot of question marks on both sides of the football. I think the offense will be pretty good for the Bearcats, but you look at the defense, obviously that's a very big concern there. I have really no concerns about, for Cincinnati. Like I said, the concern definitely is the defense, but this team, this roster is just really not talented enough. Is Scott Satterfield the right head coach here for the Bearcats? I really don't know. It's kind of hard to tell as of right now here for Cincinnati, and a lot of people are predicting that Cincinnati will be the worst team in the Big 12. I don't know. It's kind of hard to tell who's going to be the worst team in the Big 12. And like I said, I don't think anybody's going to go winless in this conference. So I don't think Cincinnati is going to be all that bad. I think they don't go winless in the Big 12 this year. But if there are two teams on here that can probably go winless, it's Cincinnati and then also the next team I'm about to show you in just a second. But again, Cincinnati, obviously the concern for them is the defense. Again, I think this team as of right now is clearly the worst team in the Big 12. Again, they just have no high expectations whatsoever. But again, I think the offense will be pretty good for the Bearcats. But again, I got this team at number 16 here in my preseason power rankings. Moving on to number 15, this is another team that I think probably can go winless in the Big 12. That's BYU. I got them here at number 15. BYU had a pretty tough schedule last year. I think that's the reason why they had a disappointing season. And I think this year's schedule is definitely a lot more tougher compared to last year. BYU is a team that doesn't have a bad roster, but again, it's really going to come down to their schedule. Again, I think they do have some playmakers on this roster, but again, with their schedule and everything, that's the reason why you're seeing them here at number 15. It's definitely going to be a little bit difficult for them to get a Big 12 win. Again, I think BYU and Cincinnati are the two teams that possibly can go winless in this conference, but again, I don't really expect anybody to go winless in this conference. But again, BYU and Cincinnati are the two teams that maybe can go winless in the Big 12, so you never know about both of these teams. But again, not really a lot of high expectations here for this BYU team. It's not really just about the roster for me. It's more about the schedule here for this BYU team. So again, I don't think this team is going to be bad. It's more about the schedule. With a tough schedule and everything, can they make it to a bowl game? Kind of hard to tell. We'll see what they do this year, but they're here at number 15 in my power rankings. Moving on to number 14, that's Arizona State. I think Arizona State's going to be a little bit better this year. I think they'll definitely be more competitive when they come to the Big 12 this season. Of course, had a pretty rough last year in the Pac-12 and everything, but with them coming to the Big 12 with a second-year head coach, this team has a lot of production coming back on both sides of the football. Again, I think they'll be very competitive when it comes to the Big 12 and everything, and they have a chance to probably make it to a bowl game. They have a non-conference game in week number 2 against Mississippi State. If they somehow pull off a win there against the Bulldogs and everything, I think Arizona State can go to a bowl game, but if they don't win that game, I think it's going to be probably a game. I think it's probably going to be a year where Arizona State comes up just short of making it to a bowl game. But I got them winning that game against Mississippi State. I don't have this team going to a bowl game, though. They got a pretty tough schedule in the Big 12 conference, but again, I think their roster is pretty good enough to compete in this conference. So again, Arizona State here at number 14. I do expect them to be a lot better this season. Number 13 is Houston. This is another team kind of similar to Arizona State. I think they'll be a lot more better this year kind of compared to the last couple years. Obviously, it was a disappointing year last year for this Houston team in their first year in this conference. But you got Willie Fritz taking over now as the head coach. I think the future is definitely looking bright. I mean, obviously had a really good last couple years at Tulane. I think he's definitely bringing the future here for this Houston football program. And if Houston can have a pretty good year, go to a bowl game, I think this is a future dark horse team in the Big 12. I wouldn't really say a top contender yet because they don't really have like the talented roster like some of those top teams in the Big 12, but they're a very consistent team. Maybe they're kind of like consistent in the years to come. Maybe they're right around 6, 7, 8 wins, just like TCU and Texas Tech and some of these other teams that are consistent in the Big 12. But again, I think Houston will be a lot better this year. I like what they've added in the transfer portal, and I think the future again is definitely bright here for Willie Fritz and this Houston team. So again, I got the Cougars here at number 13 of Houston. Moving on to number 12, that's the Baylor Bears. Disappointing year for the Baylor Bears last year. Could they be a lot better this season? I don't know. It's kind of hard to tell. I've been having a really hard time here with this Baylor team. I think the offense is a little bit concerned there for the Baylor Bears offense, but then you look at the defense. They might be a pretty solid defense, but again, their schedule is also very tough. They have a non-conference game against Utah. I know that's a Big 12 game and everything, but that is counted as a non-conference game. If Baylor loses that game to Utah, I think it's going to be another pretty rough year. Again, their schedule is very tough, especially in the non-conference when you got Utah there on the schedule. And if they don't win that game, like I said, they probably will have a pretty rough year, but if they somehow pull off a huge upset and ruin Utah's, playoff hopes and also their Big 12 championship hopes, I think Baylor might have a really good year. But as of right now, I got this team here at number 12. I don't think they're going to be terrible. Again, I'm just really having a hard time figuring out how good this team is going to be, but we'll see what they look like next weekend going into the first weekend of the college football season. And again, we're going to kind of figure these teams out once we get into, 4 weeks of the college football season, and we'll see how good these teams are actually going to be. So I got Baylor here at number 12. Number 11 is Colorado. So I know I got Colorado here outside the top 10. They should be definitely inside the top 5. I'm not really buying that, though. Again, I think Colorado is going to be really good this year, though. Let's talk about that for a second. I think Colorado is definitely going to be a lot better this season. They'll definitely make it to a bowl game. You got Shadir Sanders back at quarterback. I mean, obviously, it really comes down to the offensive line, though, for Colorado. If they can protect Sanders in the backfield and give him plenty of time to throw the football, then Colorado's going to be a really explosive passing game. And then the defense obviously wasn't really good last year for the Buffaloes. They bring in some transfers, to help them out and everything. The question is, how good is the defense going to be? I mean, we'll find out how good this Colorado team is going to be against Nebraska in a couple weeks. If they win that game, I think Colorado might have a chance to be a dark horse in the Big 12. But if they don't win that game, I think it's going to be probably a season where they're not a dark horse team and definitely not a top contender. I know a lot of people are saying that Colorado is a top contender when it comes to the Big 12 and everything, but I am just not buying that. I think this is one of the most well-talked about teams from last year. Again, this team was just 4-8. They're still a long ways away from, actually becoming a contender, out of all those Big 12 teams in this conference. But I think it will be a pretty good year for Colorado. Again, it's really going to come down to the offensive line here for the Buffaloes. Again, if they give Sanders plenty of time to throw the football, this will be a very explosive offense. But again, I think it's going to come down to the defense as well. So I got Colorado here at number 11. Let's go to the top 10 now. So at number 10, I got TCU. TCU, I think, will be a lot better compared to last year, coming off a disappointing season. This is one of the more fewer consistent programs in the Big 12, so they should be right around 6, 7, 8 wins, somewhere in that range. I think the offense has a chance to be pretty decent, but I think the defense will definitely be the strength of this team. TCU has a tough non-conference game against Stanford on the road. They have to go out west to play that game, but if TCU can pull off the win there, I think it's going to be a really good season for TCU, and also they can probably be a dark horse in the Big 12, but if they don't win that game, then it will be a disappointing loss, and also maybe another disappointing season here for the Horned Frogs. But again, I do expect this team to turn things around this year, and they're here at number 10 here in my power rankings. Moving on to number 9, that's another consistent team, and that is the Texas Tech Red Raiders. Texas Tech was also a very disappointing team last year. I think they'll be a lot better this season. Like I said, compared to TCU, this is one of the more fewer consistent programs in the Big 12. They should be right around 6, 7, 8 wins, somewhere in that range. And I think they're also a dark horse team in the Big 12. So again, I got Texas Tech here at number 9. Both sides of the football should be very solid for them. Moving on to number 8, that's Arizona, another newcomer coming over from the Pac-12. They're coming off a very good season last year, but this will definitely be a step back for this Arizona team. Obviously with a new coach and everything, but I think this team has still got plenty of playmakers from last year's roster. They got their returning quarterback returning from last year. Noah Fifi had a really good freshman season. So what is he going to look like? I mean, we'll have to see what he looks like going into the first 4 weeks. And then you look at the defense for Arizona. That's obviously a little bit of a concern there for the Wildcats. They lost quite a bit of talent there on that side of the football from last year's team, but I think this should overall be a really good Arizona team. I think they're still a dark horse team in the Big 12, and back in the month of January, I had actually Arizona at the top of the power rankings, but again, with all the coaching changes and everything throughout the spring and also throughout the winter, I did make a lot of changes here ever since the spring, and I got this team now down to number 8, but again, I think this team is a dark horse team in the Big 12. Moving on to number 7, that's West Virginia, another very big surprise team, of course, from last year. I think West Virginia is going to be a top 25 team this season. They have a lot of production coming back, especially on the offensive side of the football. I think the offense will be pretty good, not very explosive, but pretty good for them. And then you look at the defense for West Virginia. They lost quite a bit there from last year, but I think the defense will be okay. I have no really big concerns here for West Virginia, but you look at, the first, 2 games of the season for West Virginia, maybe the first 3 games, I should say. They do have a non-conference game in week number 2 against a lesser competition, but they got a big non-conference game to open up the season against Penn State. That'll be a home game for West Virginia. If they can win that game, I think this is a top contender in the Big 12, but if they don't win that game, I think they're just a dark horse team. But again, I think this is a dark horse contender in the Big 12, but again, if they beat Pittsburgh as well, this is a team that definitely can probably go on to have a really good season. So again, watch out here for the West Virginia Mountaineers. They're here at number 7. Here are my power rankings. Number 6 is Iowa State. I think a lot of people, like I said, since, the springtime, I think a lot of people have been sleeping here on this Iowa State team. The Cyclones have a lot of production coming back on both sides of the football. They have the second most returning production coming back in the country. I think this is a very underrated team, and they're also a very well-coached team when it comes to the Big 12 and everything. And they're usually right around 6, 7, 8 wins, somewhere in that range, almost every single season. I know they had a disappointing year a couple years ago, but they were a very young team that year. Last year, they brought all those young players back and everything, and they had a better season. This year, I think it's going to be a lot more of a really good season here for Iowa State. Again, they have to play Iowa in the non-conference, of course, their big rivalry game. If they somehow win that game, I think Iowa State goes on to have a chance to probably get to the Big 12 championship. If they don't win that game, obviously, I think they'll still be a top 25 team, and then also probably a dark horse team in the Big 12. So I got the Cyclones here at number 6. Moving on to the top 5 now, I got UCF at number 5. I think this team is going to be pretty good. I think they'll be definitely a dark horse team in the Big 12. UCF also has a good amount of talent on this team on both sides of the football. And just like Iowa State, they're a very well-coached team. Gus Malzahn knows how to get it done. And again, UCF has a schedule that really isn't all that bad. They have some of their tough, games at home this year. So again, I think UCF is going to have a pretty good year. Again, I think this is a dark horse team in the Big 12, and I think they'll be right there around 6, 7, 8 wins, somewhere in that range. Again, just like Iowa State, TCU, and Texas Tech, they're also a very consistent team when it comes to this conference. I know they just arrived at this conference from last year, but I do expect them to be right around 6, 7, 8 wins, somewhere in that range. So I got UCF here at number 5. All right, number 4, from 1 through 4, I think these are your top contenders in the Big 12. At number 4, I got Kansas State, or actually Kansas here. The Jayhawks come in at number 4. A lot of production coming back for this team. Jalen Daniels, of course, is back at quarterback. If he stays healthy for this Kansas team, I think Kansas might have a chance to sneak into the Big 12 championship. But if he doesn't stay healthy, and if the offense kind of struggles for the Jayhawks, I think it could be a disappointing year for the Kansas Jayhawks here. But I think Kansas either way will be a top contender in the Big 12. This is a top 25 team. Again, if they don't really have like a really good season, like, they still get to a bowl game, either way, I think this team is still going to be really good either way. Again, a lot of experience coming back here for the Jayhawks. I got them here at number 4 in these power rankings. Number 3 is Kansas State. Kansas State, of course, I have this team going to the Big 12 championship this year. I know they don't have a lot of production coming back, but this is a very well-coached team. They reload every single year, and they're just really well-coached, and they do a really nice job when it comes to like these kind of big games in the Big 12. No, they don't really have like a talented roster kind of compared to the other two teams that you're going to see here in just a little bit, but the Wildcats, I think, will be right there as a top contender in the Big 12. Again, I think I have this team going to the Big 12 championship this year. I don't really feel confident with the prediction, though, just because of how wide open this conference is going to be. Again, every single game in this conference is going to be really wide open and also very competitive as well. But I got the Wildcats here at number 3. Again, I think this will be a pretty good team. Again, they're well coached, and they do reload every single year, and they just know how to win games. So Kansas State here at number 3. Moving on to number 2, that's Utah. Utah comes in at number 2, first year in the Big 12, of course, for them. The Utes obviously had a very disappointing year last year. The quarterback position definitely was a big struggle. I think the quarterback position will be a lot better this year. Cam Rising, of course, back at quarterback after returning from an ACL injury. Did not play at all from last season, so I think Utah definitely will have their quarterback ready to go. And I think the defense will be pretty good. Just overall, a lot of experience coming back here for this Utah team, and I think they're definitely one of those top contenders in the Big 12 and definitely probably could challenge Oklahoma State as well. And speaking of Oklahoma State, they're here at number 1 in my Big 12 power rankings for the preseason. And like I said, ever since the month of January, maybe since the springtime, I had Arizona in the winter time as my favorite to win the Big 12, but they still had their head coach by that time, but now ever since the spring, I've been really high on this Oklahoma State team. A lot of experience coming back on both sides of the football. You got Ollie Gordon III returning at running back, probably one of the top running backs in the country and definitely a Heisman candidate, and then also the top running back in the Big 12 Conference. And then you got Alan Bowman returning at quarterback. If he can stay consistent, I think this offense will be really explosive, but the defense, again, it's also going to come down to the defense, which I think will be really decent for this Oklahoma State team. Again, just a lot of experience coming back for both of these teams in Utah and Oklahoma State on both sides of the football, and they're very well coached teams as well. But again, I got Oklahoma State as my preseason number 1 team here in my power rankings here for the Big 12. So those are my 2024 Big 12 football power rankings, preseason power rankings heading into the 2024 college football season. We'll have the ACC tomorrow and then get ready for college football on Saturday. Let me guys know what you think about these Big 12 power rankings here for the preseason. Give me your Big 12 preseason power rankings down in the comments below. Thanks for watching this video, and stay tuned here for more sports content videos on my Lucas Ross Sports Channel.